all probably seen or heard of Chinese people eating dog, right? Not everybody does it, but this story obviously doesn't help with the narrative.
Not everybody does it. That sounds reasonable, right? Moderate, balanced, fair, except it's not true. The truth is, almost nobody in China eats dog meat. And when people like David say, well, not everybody does it, they're not fighting the racist stereotype that Chinese people eat dogs. They're quietly keeping it alive. This isn't some harmless little misunderstanding. This is one of the oldest anti-Asian tropes in America. The idea that Chinese people are cruel, backwards, dirty, and secretly serving your golden retriever in a restaurant. And David knows that, or at least he should. So today let's talk about who actually eats dog meat in China, why most Chinese people are disgusted by it, what Chinese law actually says, and why David's "not everybody does it" routine is doing more damage than the video he claims to be criticizing. I'm John Matthews. I've lived in China for over a decade. I am an expert on Chinese history and culture, and I'm here to debunk the outrageous propaganda you see on the internet and bring some balance back to the discussion. So let's break down this recent David Zhang video. Now, I'm not going to show the whole video here in my critique simply because it's 8 minutes long and most of it is just the story of how this guy found out that his dog was killed and eaten. And sad as that is, it's not really relevant to what we're talking about. So I'll just be focusing on David's bullshit. Let's take a look.
A dog with 1.5 million followers just got stolen and eaten for $27. You've all probably seen or heard of Chinese people eating dog, right? Not everybody does it, but this story obviously doesn't help with the narrative. And more importantly, why? Now, this is Pickaxe, or Chuto is his name in Chinese, which literally translates to pickaxe, a border collie with millions of fans online. His owner, who is a travel blogger, was in Georgia at the time, the country, not the state, and he couldn't bring Pickaxe along with him, and so he left behind the dog with the parents. And when they were out in the field, this is in the rural countryside of Henan province, a pair on a scooter came in, kidnapped Pickaxe, and sold him off to a dog dealer, who then sold him to a dog restaurant for 180 yuan, which, when you convert it, it's anywhere between $27 to $34. But there's also two different narratives as to how much money he paid. Then he was killed and eaten at a dog meat restaurant.
Okay, so there's the story. Tragic if that's your dog. If it's not your dog, maybe a little less tragic. So first, let's talk about dog eating in China. In China, there are a couple of ethnic minorities that do eat dog. The most famous and well-known is probably the Zhuang people of southern China, who are known for the notorious Yulin Dog Meat Festival. However, this is only something that Zhuang people do, and local Han people generally don't partake in eating of dog meat. There are scattered rural Han Chinese communities around China in places like Sichuan, Guangdong, Guizhou that historically have consumed dog meat, but not too much. And then lastly, there is the Korean minority in China in places like Jilin and Liaoning, and that's it. It is not a Han Chinese thing to eat dogs. So David is saying this story isn't helping, but statements like "not everybody does it" is a far cry from the truth, which is actually very few people in China eat dog meat. So David is doing a lot more to propagate this stereotype than the video itself is. Chinese people know themselves that they don't eat dog meat, and this is a story that was mostly in China.
So many questions, I'll try to address them, okay? First, why? Why would someone steal a dog and sell it for 180 yuan? Well, in rural China, which this seems to be happening in a province called Henan, that's where a lot of the petty theft and crimes happen. And 180 yuan is good enough to cover maybe a week or two worth of groceries or even just eating out for lunch and dinner. So it's a decent chunk of change.
I just want to point out here that David says 120 yuan is somehow suddenly a lot of money, but in other videos he's talking about how, people are making $3 a day. But apparently this is now suddenly a lot of money and worth doing. And I don't know why he's trashing Henan province so much. I've never been. It is kind of a old central Chinese province, and it's got a lot of history, but whatever, David. There's more crime there than there is elsewhere in China. No evidence to support that, but let's get back to the dog.
The second reason is that they simply don't value the life of an animal. They see it as personal property, so it's not really considered like how the Western countries would view animals, especially dogs and cats, as some treat it as close to them as their own kids, right? And obviously dog owners in China that's a whole different story. They value the pet, value the being at a much higher level than what we're talking here.
You just heard him say it. They, Chinese people, don't value the life of animals. Again, David, an Asian growing up in America, is totally okay continuing this stereotype. This simply isn't the case in China. Many people keep dogs and cats, and just like in the West, many people love their dogs just like family members. The proof of that is the outpouring of support that this guy got, whose dog was stolen and eaten. David is using this trope for the same reasons he always does, to drum up anti-Chinese feelings. Dog owners are apparently different, he says, but wait a minute, what's dog ownership rates in China like? That's an interesting question. Let's take a look. Dog ownership in China is 25%. Now, let's compare that to the United States, where it's 38% of households own at least one dog. But Europe, the West, only has a 25% dog ownership rating as well. So does that mean that 75% of Europeans and 60% of Americans don't give a fuck about dogs? How different can Chinese people and American people's feelings be in terms of dogs? Well, the truth is, not really different. The entire pet industry in the United States is valued at $40 billion. That includes all pets. What about Chinese pet industry? It must be smaller, right? Because they don't care about animals like humans do. Well, by 2028, it's going to top 1.2 trillion renminbi, or $177 billion. So in terms of doggy love, sounds like China has more doggy love than America. So David, your racist trope is not going to work here.
That's why you see there's so many of these torture videos of cats and dogs coming out of China, right? Thirdly, so based on, again, like I mentioned, this happened in Henan province. To a lot of the people that might not understand, Henan province is one of the most historical provinces. It's where many dynasties have, their most history, like the most amount of, I would say, history of China came from parts of this province. And yet today it's a whole different ballgame. So you have, like I mentioned, a lot of these scams are from there. A lot of the bad things that happened that we've been covering for in terms of China news for the past few years has happened here. A lot of the school scandals happen in this province as well. And so this is a hotbed of issues. And when you're looking at the rural area, this is where, the laws, especially laws around pets, and there's also an argument, or at least some people made these arguments online, about whether the dog was leashed or not. Or the other question was, where were the identifications or dog ownership proof that you could provide, and all sorts of just excuses, right? But the point is, like, the core problem is that you shouldn't be selling a dog that you kidnapped for 180 yuan. And I think that's where people are really mad, both in China and shocked outside of China.
So they're really mad in China, but they're shocked outside of China. I think they're really mad about this if they love dogs. The word salad that you just heard there is so typical of David. I don't know if he even thinks about what he's going to say before he turns the camera on or not. You would think that somebody who's so serious about making these videos would actually put some thought into, like, constructing a grammatically clear thought. So Henan is this horrible place. It's where all the news are. Henan's fine, all right? The issue with the dog, yeah, it's fucking illegal, David. People in the world commit crimes. I don't know if he realizes this or not. One person's crime is not an indictment against an entire culture. And this is what all these right-wing commentators miss. Why are people mad in China, David? They're mad because they love dogs. And they don't like hearing that somebody's dog, especially a cute one, was stolen and butchered for its meat. Because China is the same as the US in terms of their love of dogs, unlike the nonsense narrative that you're spouting. But please continue. We're going to move forward through the doggy story just to the end here, so we can get to the meat of David's argument. Oh, sorry, no pun intended.
From denial to admitting that he did take it, but that nobody was around. And again, this is another lie, right? Because there was the parents of Pickaxe, or the parents of the owner of Pickaxe. And then he claims that he will pay back Pickaxe's owner the 180 yuan that he sold it off for. And he says, I can give you my own dog, the golden retriever, right? It's just a damn dog. Like, why are you so upset about this? Now, Pickaxe's owner pleads to know just like, where exactly did you take the dog, right? And so he then in a second video tracks down the dog dealer and then tries to find out which restaurant he just sent him to. And then eventually they did get to the restaurant, and they found out that he had been killed the same day he was sold. And when the owner asked for even a lock of fur as a keepsake, something to hold on to, right? The restaurant told him that they threw everything in the trash long ago. So this is where this whole story ends for them. Just trash.
Why a lock of fur? Why would the restaurant keep a lock of fur? This is just strange, and David just uses it for dramatic purposes, right? It makes no sense. Whenever we get a steak, we always save some keepsake of the steak. Like, come on. So let's hear David's analysis.
When the owner of Pickaxe tried to push back, and the kidnapper's response was simply, "It's just a dog. It's dead. Stop making a fuss." There was not even a sense of apology here, or a sense of being sorry. Now here's the part that should make you even angrier. The owner wants to press charges, possibly for theft of valuable goods, since it's a pure breed meteor-colored border collie, and that could be worth tens of thousands of yuan, plus all the additional values he provided as a travel, or I guess a partner in the travel channel. And he says that he won't settle. But the thing is, under Chinese law, pets are classified as property. They're not living beings, property, right? So the entire case is depending on whether or not the court will treat this as a case of simple theft, or it's something that could escalate in more monetary value. But overall, it's only going to land the thief a maximum of 3 years in prison. And also, there's no sort of discussion on animal cruelty happening in this case at all, right? Online, but not in the legal side of things.
There's moments in David's videos where you can see behind his eyes he realizes that he's just talking in a circle and speaking nonsense. And this is one of those examples here where he just goes like, what did I just say? So let's talk about the legal ramifications in China versus the rest of the world. David makes a big deal here about pets being classified as property, but pets are classified as property everywhere in the world. He says the guy can only get a maximum of 3 years in prison, and that there's no laws in China about animal cruelty. That's the one thing that he says that is true. Let's examine laws, though, around the world around the consumption of pet animals. In the United States, the most strict law that would apply here is the Federal PACT Act, which was passed in 2019, which would have a maximum of 7 years in prison if you did something cruel to an animal like kill it and eat it, right? But most laws about animals are, they're very state to state. Stealing a dog has a maximum penalty in the US, depending on the state, of up to 10 years in prison. But just like in China and every country, dogs are personal property. Everywhere in the world, dogs are viewed as property, the same as your car and your cell phone. If you can prove that your dog has high value, then it's a larger theft. In the US, if someone were to steal and eat your dog, you couldn't sue them for emotional harm. So David has really no legal basis here for arguing that the West is any different than China when it comes to stealing someone's dog. It's property. Dogs are property. And I'm sorry if you feel that dogs shouldn't be property, but that's the case everywhere. The only difference is the fact that in all 50 states in the US, they have specific animal cruelty laws, which would be prosecuted under a separate crime. And in China, only currently to date, 2 municipalities, Shenzhen and Zhuhai, have specific animal cruelty laws. But in 2020, China specifically passed a regulation excluding dogs from the livestock classification and reclassifying them instead as companion animals. That sounds familiar. It sounds like we're on the way to passing those laws. Now, there is no national law in China prohibiting the consumption of dog in the privacy of your own home, but there is also no longer any legal mechanism to sell and consume dog meat commercially. This is why, for those few groups in China that still believe the consumption of dog meat is culturally appropriate, it's why they steal stray dogs and sell them to restaurants, because there's no other way to get them. You can't raise them for their meat. The bottom line is, some people don't like dogs. Some people actually hate dogs and poison them. This isn't a China thing. It happens everywhere in the world.
So the last video that was uploaded by the owner of Pickaxe was a simple statement, which basically reads like a PR statement. And in particular, there's lines that tell the internet users around China not to believe rumors, don't spread misinformation, which is the typical stuff that you get when people get threatened by the police or have been spoken to. So local authorities and police obviously know the story has generated too much attention, both in China and around the world, so that they want to tone down this. But fortunately for them, I guess, from the perspective of censorship, this is a story about a dog. It's not about a person. So it's much easier to control. And you saw that many internet users in the comment actually recognized that he might have been threatened by the police. So the story probably ends here, unless something explosive happens.
David, what the fuck are you actually talking about here? The guy himself said don't spread and believe rumors because he's legally involved in a court case with these people, and he does not want them getting beat up or something like that, or them getting badmouthed on the internet, because that's going to affect his court case. He might have had the cops come by and say something to him, but I doubt it in this situation. And by the way, what explosive thing is going to happen in this story? Nothing. The guy's going to be fined or potentially go to jail.
Good thing though, this brings public awareness of something that they long denied, saying that China's still backwards, right? That they eat dogs and things like that. Like again, I've personally never eaten dog, but I've seen there's dog restaurants in China, and again, that's just part of the current culture there.
And here we have potentially the most damning statement of all that shows you David's truly not interested in sharing anything real about China with you. China is backward because they eat dogs. So David, what you're saying is China is backward because they eat dogs? Do I have you correct there? This really outrages me. The prevalence of Asian hate in the US and in Europe is so great. And here is David, who ostensibly grew up in the US, although I think he spent most of his life on a cult compound in upstate New York, who must have experienced some of the prejudices against Asian Americans, which include the oldest one, accusations that Chinese restaurants sell dog and cat meat. This belief that Chinese people eat dogs is everywhere. My best friend's son said it to me once. He said, "How can your wife like dogs? Don't Chinese people eat dogs?" I was shocked when I heard him say that and personally offended. My wife loves dogs. In fact, many years ago, we went to Guangxi province to a minority village, and there were several dog restaurants in that village. My wife and her friends were disgusted. Was I disgusted though? Well, I'm a little different. I taught anthropology for years, so I kind of don't really take issue with other people's cultural practices. I love to eat pig, but I know that pigs are just as smart and loving as dogs. But they also make great pets. But in my culture, pigs are food, so I consume them with great zeal. In India, cows are sacred animals. The thought of eating a cow would make a Hindu person respond with physical disgust. And in the US, dogs are companion animals. So most people raised in that culture, including myself, wouldn't dream of eating them. But if you were raised in a village in Dongbei, in a Korean minority family, you wouldn't feel that way. Dogs would be considered an important ritual food, and you wouldn't have a taboo about eating them. So for most Chinese people, that's the case. There is a taboo against eating dog. So for me, while I didn't want to eat dog meat, I was not disgusted by watching a man cook it. Why? Because in my opinion, people are going to people. What I think is taboo, he thinks is normal. But again, being said, Chinese people, Han people who make up 96% of Chinese population, do not eat dog and are just as disgusted by the practice as you probably are. And again, what is revolting here, if anything, is that someone of Chinese ethnicity would purposefully misrepresent Chinese people's relationship to dog eating to further propagate the stereotype when he himself has probably been a victim of it during his life. Truly, David has no shame, no limit to how far he will go to badmouth China, even at the expense of Asian stereotypes that could impact him and his family. It is absolutely disgusting. Like and subscribe for more real information about China. I will be adding more videos to this channel as time goes on, more long-form videos. Of course, my Instagram channel and my soon-to-be TikTok channel will have shorter-form videos. Let's get to the heart of this propaganda about China. Thanks for coming along for the ride, and I hope to see more of you in the near future.